Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're doing something really cool. We're tracking the incredible hidden journey of a single breath of air. We literally do this thousands of times a day, completely on autopilot, right? But the mechanics behind every single breath, they are absolutely fascinating. So our goal today is to trace that exact journey. We're going to follow the air as it travels from the outside world straight down into the hidden, microscopic architecture of your body.
But before we really get going, ask yourself what actually happens during an inhalation. I want you to imagine, just for a second, a single glowing particle of oxygen. The very moment you breathe in, that little particle starts this high-speed, almost cinematic descent right into your respiratory tract. It's a pretty epic trip through a complex biological highway, and we're going to ride shotgun every step of the way to see exactly how it keeps you alive.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Section 1, the entry of air, the initial descent. So the main job of this whole respiratory apparatus is, well, brilliantly simple in theory, but wild in execution. Our bodies have two totally non-negotiable needs here. Supply the organism with vital oxygen, and, in that exact same breath, clear out the toxic byproduct carbon dioxide. So where does this descent actually start? The second our glowing air particle leaves the room, it enters the nose, where it's drawn in and filtered. From there, it just races through the nasal passages, hits the pharynx at the back of the throat, drops rapidly through the larynx, your voice box, and then plunges straight down the trachea. That trachea is essentially the main vertical highway right into your chest. This all happens in the literal blink of an eye, perfectly engineered for speed. Moving on to section 2, the bronchial labyrinth, branching pathways. Right as our inhaled air hits the bottom of the trachea, the highway suddenly divides. We enter this vast, sprawling, branching labyrinth inside the lungs. The lungs aren't just big, empty balloons, right? They're an intricate network of pathways that get insanely more complex the deeper you go. First, the trachea splits into the main bronchi. That's one massive airway for each lung. But they don't stop there. They keep branching out into much smaller pathways called bronchioles. It's kind of like a massive tree branching out into smaller and smaller twigs. And finally, at the very ends of these tiny twigs, our air particle hits its ultimate destination, the alveoli. These are super delicate, fragile little sacs that look, honestly, incredibly like tiny clusters of grapes. Which brings us to section 3, the alveoli, the grand swap. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer, staggering scale of what's happening inside you. We have reached the microscopic destination, and we are not just talking about a few thousand of these little sacs. No way. A healthy human lung contains anywhere from 600 million to 800 million alveoli. Just let that sink in for a second. Hundreds of millions of these fragile, microscopic exchange zones are inflating and deflating inside your chest right now, as you're listening to me. The alveoli are, without a doubt, the real stars of the respiratory system. It's the exact spot where the magic happens, that vital gas exchange between the air we breathe and our internal bloodstream. Because there are just so many of them, they create a surface area that's frankly hard to wrap your head around. If you took all 600 to 800 million alveoli and laid them out completely flat, the total contact surface between the air and your blood would be roughly 100 square meters. That is literally the equivalent of an entire tennis court folded up inside your rib cage. It's wild, right? This massive, richly vascularized surface area is just nature's brilliant way of maximizing the absolute most oxygen that can enter your blood with every single breath. But how does the air actually meet the blood? Well, that happens through the capillaries. These are incredibly fine, microscopic blood vessels that directly line the super thin walls of every single alveolus. They wrap around these grape-like clusters like a tight little net. It perfectly positions the circulatory system to interface right with the respiratory system, ready to securely pass the baton. And here is the core mechanism of that grand swap. It's a totally simultaneous exchange. The oxygen, the O2, leaves the air inside the alveolus and crosses that microscopic barrier to enter the blood. At the exact same microsecond, carbon dioxide, CO2, escapes from the blood, crossing that same barrier, going the other way, to be released into the air inside the lung. And then, boom, that CO2 is immediately pushed out and expelled into the atmosphere the second you exhale. That takes us to section 4, blood distribution, the delivery network. So, our glowing particle of oxygen has successfully crossed over. The blood that initially rolled up to the alveoli was pretty poor in oxygen, but now it emerges completely enriched, fully loaded, and ready to go. First, this newly oxygenated blood leaves the lungs through the pulmonary vein, rushing straight back to the heart. And the heart steps up to act as this massive, powerful pump, just slamming that oxygen-rich blood out and propelling it through the entire circulatory system. It's pushed out at high pressure to irrigate every single organ, tissue, and extremity in your body. Let's move to section 5 and see how this all builds up. The final cellular exchange, fueling the cells. Okay, so we've tracked the oxygen from the outside air, down the throat, through the lungs, into the heart, and out into the whole body. But here is the ultimate destination, deep within the tissues of the body's organs. Down at the cellular level, we actually see the exact inverse of what happened up in the lungs. Here, the blood delivers the oxygen directly to the cells because they desperately need it for cellular metabolism. It is quite literally their fuel. And as the cells consume that oxygen to create energy, they churn out a waste product from this cellular respiration, carbon dioxide. The cell then dumps that CO2 right back out into the blood. What this means is that our bloodstream isn't just some one-way delivery service for oxygen. Actually, it's also a highly efficient 24/7 waste retrieval system. The CO2 recovered from the cells gets pumped back through the veins, back up to the heart, and finally reconducted all the way up to those pulmonary alveoli in the lungs to complete the entire cycle. And this perfectly sums up the beautiful dual role of the whole respiratory system. It's running continuously without us ever having to consciously direct it, capturing life-giving oxygen from the atmosphere and distributing it into the blood. And exactly at the same time, it's working to extract that toxic CO2 waste from the blood and expel it safely back out into the world. It is just a perfectly balanced, endless loop of life. So next time you take a breath without even thinking about it, ask yourself what incredible microscopic universe is working constantly to keep you alive. From that initial rush of air down your trachea to a literal tennis court-sized network of alveoli folded up inside your chest, right down to the cellular exchange happening millions of times a second. It's just truly a marvel. Thank you so much for exploring this explainer with me today. Keep learning and hey, keep breathing. Hey everyone, and